Would you like to turn your idea into an invention, but you don't know where to start? Every day, people just like you come up with great ideas that have the potential to be successful products. Sometimes even by accident. The problem is knowing how to get your idea out of your head and onto the shelf. And there are plenty of mistakes and scams to be avoided. What you need is a map to lead you step by step through the invention development process. Let us show you how to conceive, prototype, protect, refine, and monetize your invention. Inventing Success, your guide to becoming a successful inventor.
Hello, Brandon.
Hey.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
We're going to talk about your invention, the Porch Potty.
I didn't really have a backyard, and we got a dog. And so when we had a dog, in the city, we needed a place to, take him out, and there wasn't really any place to go.
It quickly became clear to me that my dog's bathroom schedule didn't always mesh with my schedule. And if we were both going to be happy, I needed to figure out how she could go to the bathroom on her own. And then I realized this was probably a solution a lot of people needed.
A friend of ours came up with the idea of maybe putting something on the patio, and there was a product out there that was really expensive that kind of did that, but it was really poorly designed. So I started tinkering with it, and just like any inventor does, they come up with these ideas and say that, a light bulb goes off and says, hey, maybe I could sell this. And I ended up taking parts from Home Depot and anything I can think of, and started just tinkering, and that's how it kind of got started.
That's awesome, and that is an example of the best kind of invention, where you're not sitting there thinking, how can I invent something and make some money? Instead, you were living your life, you encountered an obstacle, and you realized that there must be a better solution to this than what was available, which was either nothing and you had to rush home and take your dog out, or your dog peed in the house, or there was, I guess, a fairly expensive product that didn't work very well,
right.
And you said, there's got to be a better way.
There's a better way.
And then you started tinkering and combining odds and ends and random bits and pieces, and you came up with, I guess, your first prototype, right?
Right.
You're going to show us some pictures of those early prototypes, right?
Right. So the first picture I'm going to show you is a picture of me building the very first prototype in my garage using 4 pieces of wood that cost about $6 from Home Depot, a piece of grass, some plumbing parts that I also got from Home Depot. I went through about 6 or 7 really major different prototypes, an infinite number of minor differences. But the first idea was to take a patch of grass and literally water it to keep it fresh and like normal grass. Mm-hmm. Well, I ended up using somewhat of a shower head attached to the side of this thing to do that.
That sounds great.
And
how'd that work?
And it worked, but it was kind of clumsy and didn't, and the part of the shower head part was very expensive. You try some idea, you realize either the cost is too much or it's too hard for the customer to use, and you continue to refine it. And eventually I found a pop-up sprinkler head for under $1 to fill that spot. The aha moment became when I realized that all the parts that I had bought from Home Depot ended up being about $11.
Wow.
And the product that I had told you was the expensive version that it didn't work well was well over $300.
Wow.
And so when I said to myself, if I can build this for $11 and they're selling it for $300, there's got to be a place for me to sell it for maybe half of what they're selling it for. That was the first idea.
My view of the invention process is that there's basically 5 steps. There's what I call problem solving, which is where you identify a problem in the world and then you come up with a solution, which we've just talked about. There is the proof of concept, or reduction to practice, which is where you take that idea you've had in your head and you render it tangible. You make a physical thing. So that sounds like what you're doing on the floor of your garage.
Right.
The third step is protecting your idea. So that's where you decide if you want to get a patent or not get a patent, or trademark or trade secret or copyright or whatever. The fourth step is refinement, where you take your crude prototype and do whatever you need to do, whether it's engineering or sourcing or human factors or manufacturing methods or materials, and make it into a product or a producible item. And then the fifth thing is the commercialization and monetization. So we've talked about where the idea came from, which was just a real need in your life, which is absolutely the best place to get ideas from. We talked about how you cobbled things together and did this iterative process of constant changing and refinement and trial and error until you came up with a solution that really works. What did you do, if anything, about protecting the idea?
I did get it patented, and I'm actually still in the process of getting that finally approved through the patent office, because that takes years.
To protect confidential information, Inventing Success does not discuss the contents of a patent until it issues.
I went ahead and started selling it immediately. I sold the first prototype.
I'm assuming that's something that you handmade, right? Now, I mean, if we can lift this up, this is the actual product, the production product, right? So this is a manufactured item.
Right.
There's a few steps between selling something you made out of 2x4s in your garage and having a beautifully packaged manufactured item. How did you go down that road?
First, 200 units were made of wood and screws.
Wow.
The second 200 were made of like a poly wood, a kind of a deck wood that you could screw into, but it was made of a foam synthetic wood. The third iteration was using vinyl fence material, because it withstood outdoor elements very well. And I started to look at customizing those parts better. So I actually had the vinyl I hired a vinyl fence manufacturer to route out certain areas so the pieces could fit together, and it was still shipped unassembled. And then it wasn't until then where I realized that I could use a low-cost vacuum form process, and that was only $4,000 of tooling. So at that point, the product was making well above that, and it was an easy choice to make. And I felt like keeping my costs down in terms of tooling was very important. So I tried using materials that were readily available, and I continued to find ways to do that. Even with this product, it's a mold that's called vacuum form. And a vacuum form mold is a lot cheaper than a injection molding.
Or blow mold.
We're talking the difference between $4,000 versus $80,000. And so even with this this particular design, it still is a low-cost startup cost.
I assume you looked into building injection molds or blow molds or something, and you also looked into thermoforming or drape forming. And the trade-off you usually make is when you have an inexpensive capital investment, the tool, you have a higher unit cost. So I'm assuming that if you had made an $80,000 injection mold, that your unit cost, your piece price would have been less. But of course you still have to amortize an expensive tool.
That's right. And now I'm at the point where the sales are high enough that it might make sense to switch over to a high tooling cost and low part cost. And that's a decision point that I think anybody would get to at a certain volume. And so it's one of those kind of steps you take along the way.
You decided to manufacture and market your own product as opposed to licensing it. Can you tell us how you arrived at that decision and whether you looked at the licensing option?
I realized that we live in a day and age where the internet allows you access to millions of customers without having to go the traditional route. I like to get the product out there on the internet first as a test that you have something good, but also because the margins are the highest, because you're selling directly to the customer. After that point, I like to then go to catalogs, because then your margins come down a little bit, but you have new exposure to different customers that you hadn't on the internet. And then after that, I like to then entertain the idea of going to retail stores, where your margins are almost nothing.
Were you intimidated at all by becoming a manufacturer and having to sort of start from scratch and invent a distribution channel?
Believe it or not, the corporation that I own has 0 employees and 0 office space and 0 assets. So that was one of the things that I feel was a key to success for the product, was that I kept my overhead low and outsourced all the operational aspects of it. So it wasn't as scary when you're not having to sign up for a lease or get your own warehouse or like we talked about already, the tooling, you're not really shelling out a lot of money, or you're not taking on a lot of risk.
Let me ask you, because we're constantly hearing from and speaking to people who are intimidated by the prototyping process or by the prospect of manufacturing and marketing themselves. Would you characterize yourself as a technical guy? I mean, are you a guy that's really good with your hands and you understand a lot about materials and tools and manufacturing and so forth?
I wish I could say I know, but I do feel I am, because I have a mechanical engineering background.
Okay, let's cut this and let me coach the guest a little. No,
Yeah.
just kidding. Okay, so you are, but I mean, we've certainly spoken to people before who are not technical at all.
Right.
The process you went through here, while it might have been more familiar and comfortable to you, do you think it's within the reach of a person who doesn't have an engineering degree? Or because one of the things I always say is you don't need an engineering degree. You know, you can.
Yeah, you don't need
together.
one.
And
I would
you're
agree
blowing
with
my
that.
whole gig here.
No, I know. That's why I said I wish I could say I don't have one, because I truly feel like I wasn't using my engineering background at all for this. It was just having the drive to continue developing the idea. So I would go to Home Depot and I'd spend hours picking up a part off a shelf, taking another part, seeing if it would actually fit,
Right.
and going, would this work what I'm trying to do? And if it didn't, put it back and try another one.
I think you told me when we spoke some time ago that this is something that has made you in the seven figures. It's made over $1 million.
Yeah, is it?
That's pretty remarkable. So you are a very successful inventor. Are you working on new inventions now?
I like the pet and baby industry because it seems to be one where customers are passionate about about the product.
I don't happen to care much for animals myself, but I know that there are some wackos out there. Whoops, sorry. So you sort of got the bug now. I mean, you did it once. You were very successful at it, and you continued to do more things and branch out. And so when people ask what you do for a living, do you say I'm an inventor?
I do.
Brandon, thank you so much. It's been very informative. Appreciate it. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Yay!